Kjerag, the nation of the Snow Realm, one of the most remote and mysterious nations on Terra. Well, mysterious for many of those who call Terra their home at least. The mountain range is inhospitable but has been called home for many centuries. Kjerag is located on a mountain range in the center of Terra. Surrounded on all sides by other nations, it is, relatively speaking, a backwards part of the continent. However, the mountain range has allowed those who call it home to go about their business without worries of invasion. This geographical restriction has kept it isolated from its neighbors' warmongering and for the most part free from invasion for its entire history. However, Terra's constant shifting of geopolitical standings has brought the country to the attention of the powers that be, and it has forced Kjerag to evolve rapidly. And today, we shall discuss this little slice of Terra, its people, its history, and the trials and tribulations that have made the country what it is, heading into retracing our steps. It's not very hard to pick a particular spot to start with when talking about Kjerag. After all, it is its most prominent feature. Like a wall that separates Terra's most northern reaches from the rest of the continent, Kjerag is a mountain range that runs north and south across the western part of the continent. Its altitude is so high that many of its peaks are nigh impossible to climb. On its east lies the core countries of Terra, specifically Casimirs and Victoria, and to its west lies Colombia. The climate, as the name Snow Realm would imply, is extremely cold and unforgiving, so the vast majority of settlements in Kjerag lie in its basin. Despite laying claim to all of the mountain, in reality it is just this basin that is truly Kjerag. The basin is filled with dense forests and lush lakes, and is, at least in comparison, a pleasant habitat. The most prominent clans of the region, the Silver Ashes, the Browntails, and the Palaroche, as well as the Vinebeak Court, can all be found here. However, if any of Kjerag's mountains can be called theirs, it is Mount Caorlan. Not only is it the tallest mountain on Terra, reaching a rather modest 5,653 meters, Everest is 8,849 meters for comparison, it is also the heart of Kjerag's religion. The people of Kjerag believe the mountain to be the resting place of their god KJERAGANDR, and as such it is treated with the utmost respect. Due to its unique location, Kjerag is free from catastrophes. From those fateless among you, this is the mountain shielding Kjerag from the storms. However, true believers in the might of KJERAGANDR know that it is the goddess who shields Kjerag. After all, the mountain is her bones, and the rivers her tail. All those within Kjerag walk upon her body, and would be wise to pay respect to her. With the goddess mentioned, I believe it is time to move past the mountain and discuss the foundation of the country. Its society, its culture, its government. All things that spring up out of the belief in KJERAGANDR. According to myth, KJERAGANDR led the ancestors of those who would found Kjerag into the mountains, away from wars and catastrophes. KJERAGANDR, with her limitless love and warmth, embraced those who Terra had spurned. Unable to bear the sight of those without a home, KJERAGANDR created springs from which hot water would flow, trees from which fruit would be born, and most importantly, wind and snow that would freeze catastrophes in place. Under the loving care of the goddess, Kjerag's first settlements were built. With such a mighty goddess, no wonder the people of Kjerag revere her so. For at least 1,000 years, no catastrophe has marred Kjerag, and its people have embraced their god lovingly. For 3 centuries after the country's founding, KJERAGANDR guided her people directly. In what some Terran historians would consider Kjerag turning from ignorance to modernity, after that point people took leadership from the goddess. This was obviously written by a Victorian, so you should know how to treat such blasphemous talk of our most wonderful goddess. In truth, the noble goddess KJERAGANDR bestowed rulership onto 3 clans before falling into a deep sleep within Mount Caorlan. Thus, the Tri-Clan Council was born. The Silver Ashes represent the bones of KJERAGANDR. They were told to speak to the mountains, and as such became the industrial backbone of Kjerag and the most progressive of the clans. The Browntails represented the fur of KJERAGANDR. They were told to speak to the beasts, and claimed ownership of much of the forests of Kjerag. They are the moderates of the council. Lastly, the Palaroches represent the flesh of KJERAGANDR. They were told to speak to the land, and around half of Kjerag's population lives under their protection as the military might of the land. They are the most militant and conservative of the council. Despite being the ruling clans of Kjerag, they did not rule the country alone. The Vinebeak Court, formerly known as the Vinebear Court before Yostar changed the translation, is the religious organization that manages Kjerag's fate. The court is led by two figures, the Great Elder, the nominal leader of the religion's followers, and the Colan Saintess. The Saintess is the highest authority in both Kjeragandra's religion and secular government. Due to Kjerag's harsh terrain and the difficulties that it causes in uniting it, it is the religion that ties the land together. In a way that baffles all those who do not know her love, the people of Kjerag revere their goddess without question. Even the least pious man within Kjerag would bend their knees at a sign presented by Kjeragandr. Those who are most devout become friars for the Vinebead court and spend their lives dedicated to spreading her teachings to all the settlements within the country. As such, it is no wonder that the Colan Saintess is revered and respected by all. A Saintess is appointed to the position by the Vinebead court and act as Kjeragandra's messenger. She is technically the final authority on all things Kjeragandr and may even impose the will of Kjeragandr on the Tri-Clan Council should it be necessary. As a rule, this is not something that happens in practice. The Great Elder runs the Vinebead court, and the Saintess is little more than a figurehead. The Vinebead court even discount the legend that led to the creation of the position as something fabricated to unite Kjerag. Long ago, the elders angered Kjeragandr and the goddess swore never to protect Kjerag again. A harsh winter befell the lands of Kjerag, and to calm her fury, the Vinebead court sent a young girl to the top of Mount Colan to pray to the goddess until her soul was sacrificed. It was only after 100 saintesses had been sacrificed in this way that Kjeragandr forgave the people of Kjerag and the harsh winters ended. However, in the words of the goddess herself, things were a little different. Every year, a girl was chosen to be saintess and sent to the mountaintop to pray until she died. However, over almost 100 years, people turned against these rituals as they went unanswered. As such, there was a rebellion launched against the Vinebead court by a small clan leader, as their daughter was chosen to be the next saintess. Many of the Vinebead court's buildings were leveled and much of its texts were burned. This is the cause of the court not knowing an accurate account of its early history. Even with her father rebelling, the saintess still climbed the mountain that year. Kjeragandr, who had slept for 100 years, awakened, having regained her strength upon hearing the prayers of the saintess. The awakening of the goddess was so obvious that the rebellion ended in an instant and the Vinebead court retained its position today, however have since altered the story so that it paints them in a more benevolent light. Regardless, since the uprising, Kjerag has continued the tradition of the saintess, and it has become a position held by life for the chosen saintess. It was this display of Kjeragandra's favor that made the saintess such a powerful position within Kjerag. After all, who could deny the will of the goddess? And if it is not already obvious by how I have spoken about her, the goddess Kjeragandr is no myth. Kjeragandr is one of the Ferenmut and guards her followers from the dangers of Terra. Despite the common belief that she ascended into the mountains, the Ferenmut continues to personally watch over the people of Kjerag directly through a proxy. She has adopted the identity of Yer, the head maid of the Colan Saintess. Since the very foundation of that office, she has observed the saintesses and by extension all of Kjerag. She is happy that her followers continue to worship her, but is disappointed by their continued isolationism in a rapidly changing world. Due to its isolation caused by its leader's refusal to expand and the mountainous terrain, until recently much of its industry was left underdeveloped. According to legends, the three great clans carved off the country and distributed the resources amongst themselves. As such, each clan became highly specialized in their own dedicated areas, even if it was in a primitive fashion. The Palaroches produced grain, the Browntails produced furs and clothing, and the Silver Ashes produced minerals and tools. Outside of the basin, the mountain tribes have rejected modernity and embraced that hunter-gathering lifestyle, surviving by existing with a small clan structure. Due to the logistical challenges presented by life in the mountains and the country's unwillingness to modernize at all times, this was the best Kjerag could achieve for centuries. However, time has changed. The previous head of the Silverash clan, Olafur, began the process of modernizing Kjerag. It was he who would introduce the modern currency system used within Kjerag to this day. His son, Ensiodes, would push this even further and founded Colan Trade. Colan Trade would import outdated Victorian equipment and begin to radically reform the mining industry within Kjerag. With modernized mining techniques, Colan Trade quickly outproduced what was consumed within Kjerag itself, and as such, for the first time in history, Kjerag began exporting goods to the rest of Terra, primarily Victoria. This extra capital allowed Colan Trade to develop other aspects of Kjerag. Thanks to Enceodes' efforts, modern transport infrastructure, trading outposts, mineral refining, and the production of Iridium-based technologies have become realities within Kjerag. As a result, the Silver Ashes have become the most prominent and powerful of the three clans in modern Kjerag. So, now it's time for a bit of a history lesson. We've mostly covered everything you need to know about Kjerag's history except the period right before the modern day. We have lightly touched on it while covering the economy, but I do believe we need to touch on it a bit more to discuss the modern standing of Kjerag. And it begins with the Reformation started by Olafur Silverash. Around the Terran year of 1060, Olafur would begin to encourage the industrialization of Kjerag. Following the Battle of Four Emperors, Gaul would be destroyed and the geopolitical state of Terra was completely altered. Olafur recognized the importance of Kjerag being able to face this reality without turning away from the advancing technology that would one day allow these countries to invade Kjerag. So, Olafur began exploring countries outside of Kjerag. While in Victoria, not only would he establish connections with some of the Victorian nobility, he would also meet his wife, Elizabeth. In 1065, Olafur returned to Kjerag and began opening new factories and Victorian-style businesses across the country, laying the groundwork for the future modernization of Kjerag. It was when he began laying train tracks across the mountains that the other members of the Tri-Clan Council and the Vinebead Court formed a combined front to resist these radical reforms. For the next few decades, tensions between them would continue to escalate and would reach their boiling point in 1082. The Patriarch of the Browntails convinced the Paraloches to agree to assassinate Olafur. They had rigged the villa that he and his wife were going to visit to burn down once they reached there. However, in a twist of good fortune for those planning against them, they died in a train accident on their way to the villa. No good disaster should go unexploited, so they took the opportunity to further isolate the Silverash clan and frame their allies, the Edelweiss clan. As such, the Edelweiss were exiled from Kjerag. While this would put a halt to the plans of Olafur, it would unknowingly release Enceodes Silverash on the world. Following the death of his parents, he would leave Kjerag and study abroad in Victoria. Reuniting with Gnosis Edelweiss, the two would found Carlin Trade and begin their plan of revolutionizing Kjerag. Recruiting the three-time Casimir's major winner Dagenbrocker to train their own private army and provide Enceodes with protection, the trio would return to Kjerag in 1090 and set about bringing Olafur's dream of a modern Kjerag into reality. Initially, the Browntails would support Carlin Trade in this endeavor, believing that closer cooperation would bring the council together. It quickly became apparent that the Silverash clan was receiving more of the promised benefits. All the while, the Palaroches became more and more displeased with the blatant disregard of Kjerag's traditions. This would all culminate with the Snowcap Incident during the events of Break the Ice. With his estranged sister Enya Silverash as the current saintess, and Enceodes as the de facto most powerful clan, the Tri-Clan Council and Vinebead Court were looking for a reason to crack down on him. This was presented to them when it was discovered that Gnosis was conducting illegal mining operations and Enceodes was pressured to surrender his territory. He readily agreed to it, but only if the Carlin Saintess was given the right to govern not just his territory, but all the lands of Kjerag. Believing the matter was dealt with caused the other players to lower their guard, but this was all according to Enceodes' plan. Firstly, he invited the Doctor of Rhodes Island to visit Kjerag, and his other sister Encia accompanied him. Secondly, he planted agents within the Palaroche and Browntails. Thirdly, he began secretly smuggling his elite soldiers into the area around Mount Carlin. From here, he just had to let the Doctor unravel things with their investigation. Gnosis, who had been fired from Carlin Trade by Silverash, approached the Browntails, and if they would ensure his good standing in Kjerag, he would help them take down Enceodes, revealing to them the secret railway bridges he had been using to smuggle weapons and soldiers into the Heartland. Gnosis would also take the opportunity to blow up the railway, allowing the Browntails to take Silverash's soldiers captive, but also tying the two together from this point on. Munch, who was secretly working for Gnosis, attempts to assassinate Enceodes, and as he was working officially for the Browntails, they are accused of sabotaging the holy hunt that was ongoing. Additionally, it was discovered that the Great Elder was poisoned by wine presented to him by the Palaroche. While Enceodes was publicly shaming the Browntails and Palaroches for their plot to overthrow the Tri-Clan Council, Gnosis would appear and proclaim he would stop Enceodes' vile schemes in the name of the Browntails. Regenbracher effortlessly put him down because of this, and the damage of the reputation of two of Kjerag's great clans was done. The Doctor is the only reason the clan heads escaped this series of unfortunate events. They pretty much immediately figured out that this was Ensiodis' plan from the start. Take out the competition and become the sole head of Kjerag. Gnosis and Ensiodis are skilled players of the Game of Thrones, but the Doctor is no slouch themselves. Allying with the Browntails and Palaroches, Rhodes Island, in the largest inverted commas ever, indirectly interfered with Kjerag's burgeoning civil war. Radatos, the leader of the Browntails, attempted to kill Silverash by trapping the pair in a burning building. This would have succeeded if not for that meddling Dagenverker, who simply busted the wall of the building down and rescued both leaders. Arktos, leader of the Palaroche, decided simply overpowering the Silverash forces with his military was the best course of action. The Doctor dispatches Encia to climb Mount Caroline and get Enya to interfere directly to put a stop to this war. Even without her sister's interference, Enya was already preparing to descend the mountain. With a blizzard raging across all of Kjerag, the goddess uses her might to halt it for the Saintess, a clear sign from their god that this Saintess is to be obeyed, putting a stop to the conflict before it destroys Kjerag. The sight of the one chosen by the goddess KJERAGANDR is enough for both Arktos and Ensiodes to kneel before Enya. Despite not fully playing out as intended, this was still a victory for Ensiodes, as Kjerag was finally united under one leader. After the Snowcap Incident, Kjerag, under the leadership of the Saintess, has opened its borders to the world. They have even begun accepting foreigners into their fate. Investments from across Terra flow into the country, of most note from Columbia and Casimiras. This allowed them to build a luxury rail line for all tourists visiting their country. The rail runs from the center of Kjerag to the new statue of KJERAGANDR built on Lake Zilberhornse. However, nothing can be completely stress-free, and the Victorian nobles who once funded Caroline trade are looking at a return on their investments, specifically the Duke of Castor. Initially, she sends Viscount Harold and his personal army to remind Ensiodes that his debt is to be paid. However, this is just a good excuse to get soldiers into the country. With the inauguration of the statue of KJERAGANDR approaching, the country is at a crucial juncture. With that said, Leto arrives to beat up her deadbeat dad Arktos, and a Trilby Asher is sent by the Duke of Castor to find probable cause for the soldiers to act. Unfortunately for the spy, he's going to be comic relief as Dagenverker finds him before he can do anything. Thanks to a series of unfortunate events, the Trilby Asher is pursued by Dagenverker across the country during his information gathering mission. Despite repeated failures, his persistence eventually bears fruit, and he discovers that Caroline Trade has been storing excess imported metal at an underground station beneath Lake Zilberhornse. The statue of KJERAGANDR was most likely built to avoid any suspicion that this sudden import of materials would cause. With this information, Harold and his soldiers are forced to act and march on the statue during its inauguration. If they can expose Kjerag's secret, they can force them to sell exclusively to Victoria. Dagenverker alone confronts the advancing soldiers. Neither side truly wants to harm the other, but the situation has forced their hands. So Dagenverker battles against 2,000 soldiers to buy time for some special guests to arrive. The Trilby Asher meanwhile infiltrates the train to assassinate these special guests, but discovers that one of them is Mob, the new spokesman of Casimira's General Chamber of Commerce, accompanied by a guard of campaign knights. Additionally, the Doctor is aboard the train with a Rhine Labs director, Ulysses. The Doctor recognizes Mr. Bellingham from their time together in Victoria, and realizing that he cannot kill any of these people without starting a war with Columbia or Casimiras, the Trilby Asher is unable to do anything. With Mob's arrival, Caroline Trade announces their trade partnership with the KGCC. Harold immediately ceases hostilities after this, as a military attack on a trade partner is definitely a declaration of war, especially for a country so obsessed with capital like Casimiras. With Kjerag's independence from Victoria tentatively secured, the country is safe. For now. The incident is even covered up as a training exercise, and some of the Victorians remain in Kjerag after retiring. Caroline Trade even allows Rhine Labs to set up a research outpost in Kjerag to study the effects of Kristen breaking the star pod in Lone Trail, with the eventual hopes of setting up a space center there. Enya is a bit unsure about the whole thing, as it would be on Mount Caroline, but KJERAGANDR is happy at the prospect of having cannons on her body because it sounds cool. When the dust settles, Kjerag's national secret remains unexposed. Like the Asher discovered, beneath the lake lies Kjerag's first, homemade, high-speed landship. The Walnut. And that, my friends, is Kjerag, at least as it stands before retracing our steps. This video does basically tell you everything you need to know before reading Retracing Our Steps, so depending how the titling process goes, this video is coming out as Kjerag Badly Explained or the Kjerag Storyline Badly Explained. And considering this video was made primarily as a Kjerag video, it really is badly explaining the Kjerag storyline, even though you do get the general gist of what's going on. Kjerag tells us a story of isolationism, and the pains involved with reforming that system in the face of a changing world. What Ensiodes and Enya do now might break from tradition, but it is up to them to ensure Kjerag's independence into the future. After all, what good are traditions when Victoria's might can just wash them away? And it is a very narrow tightrope that these two walk. However, with their powers combined, even reluctantly, they can manage it. Probably. And if you want to discover how they overcome this next hurdle, you're going to have to check out the next video on this channel, Retracing Our Steps. I promise you will get it soon. Or if you are watching this at some point in the future, it is already up, and you should probably watch that. Please. Thank you. Shout out to the wonderful members of the factory. You are the beautiful ice goddess, making sure that I survive the winter in this brutal and harsh climate. Y'all, be good people, and I will see you in the next one. Like, we all agree that your god turning itself into a head maid just to hang out with the saintess is low-key kind of fruity. Like, we can just agree to that.